So I am the sixth great-granddaughter of Brigham Young. A lot of my life was seeing my mom not always be very respected. So seeing women be treated as less than.
There is this problem, the over-sexualization of women within the LDS Church.
Hopefully I'm hot enough. Hopefully I look good enough so that I can be loved and accepted. Otherwise, I have no worth. I'm not smart. I'm just a woman. Why do they think they can have an opinion about our bodies and how we look? But they do. This is just part of the church culture. We don't go to young women's and think, okay, we're going to study what a sociopath is. We're going to study what a narcissist is. We're going to study the red flags of all these things. We're going to study addiction and how to spot the signs of addiction and the true core, and cause of addiction, and looking and getting to the core and root of things.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 26 of the Clarity Podcast. I'm your host, Claire, and this week's guest was Breeana Wright. Breeana has had quite the story that has brought her closer to Christ. We shared laughs, we shared tears, we shared so much in this episode, and it's more than I can even describe right now, and you guys are just going to have to tune into the full episode yourself for all this and more on this week's episode of the Clarity Podcast. Everyone has a journey they're walking. And along that road, we are met with potholes, road bumps, rain, storms, and sometimes just fog. But through it all, we're really just looking for one thing: clarity. Clarity so we can walk with confidence in that next step. There's one source I run to for that clarity. In the darkest of nights, Jesus offers me light that shines through even the thickest storms. Welcome to the Clarity Podcast, where we find clarity through the one who saves us all. Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 26 of the Clarity Podcast. I'm your host, Claire, and today's guest is Breeana Wright. Welcome to the podcast, Breeana.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
We're so excited to interview you. And Breeana just gave me a rundown of her story, and I'm so excited to share with you guys the things that she has to bring to the table and the things that she has to share, because she has had quite the journey. So, Breeana, let's just go ahead and jump right into the questions. So go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us where you're from, how old you are, and a little bit about you.
Okay, I'm the oldest of 7 children, born and raised a member of the church, and my dad was a seminary teacher. My mom was a stay-home mom, and 6 girls and 1 boy. So, I'm the oldest and oldest sister, and grew up in southern Arizona in a small town called St. David, Arizona, and then Tucson for a little bit. And then moved when I was 15 years old to the Midwest and lived in Wichita, Kansas area, Derby to be specific, and loved the Midwest. Absolutely loved living out there. So I got to experience both. I got to experience St. David, Arizona it was a mostly LDS town at the time. It was settled by members, and most of the town was members. Tiny, tiny, tiny town. So, and so I got to experience what it was like to live in a highly member area in the Utah corridor. And then I got to experience what it was like living outside of the Mormon corridor and in the mission field, as they say, out in Kansas, where it's much less, much fewer members of the church. So, but it was good living out there. I made really good friends out there. And
All right. So tell us a little bit about the differences that you noticed. So, we're talking like super dense Mormon population and then not so much. What were some of the differences you noticed, especially when you were a kid and growing up, and what was that like for you?
Well, I was homeschooled, but which I'm super, super grateful for, because it definitely made my brain kind of different. It made me, I ask questions that maybe not a lot of people ask. Like, for example, when I had my first baby, I was like, okay, well, what are vaccines really, and what's in them, and should I give them to my baby or not? And people looked at me like I was stupid for asking that question. And I thought, well, I just want to know, like, is it really good for him or not? And they're like, well, of course it is. How dare you ask? But that's just kind of how being homeschooled blessed me. However, it was also difficult because my mother struggled with depression. She came from some tough times from her growing up years, and parents that divorced, and both were, struggling in ways, and that was really hard on her. So I was homeschooled though. So a lot of good came from it, but I was basically just unschooled, and we were like the weird smelly kids in this tiny, tiny town where like the public school and their sports program was like, it was a 1A, tiny, tiny. It was like the cat's meow. It was the biggest deal there going on. And I was this homeschooler in this small town, so I didn't fit in. And it was mostly members, and there was so much gossip. I did finally go to school at age 14 into ninth grade. So I did experience school, but it's the clickiest. I don't recommend a small town to anybody. I don't recommend it. I've never been back to that town. Well, almost never since, and I never will go back. Like, you couldn't pay me to go back. so, so moving to the Midwest was great because people were more open-minded. It wasn't like this Mormon box, tiny, teeny Mormon box. It was like, even though I was an active member, I still loved going to a high school with more open-minded students where that wasn't cliquey. They didn't care about what you did last evening, and it didn't spread before you even got to school. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it was really gossipy and cliquey in the small towns. So, and then not to mention, I was I was kind of the weird one there. So, but yeah, but going to a bigger school was so refreshing for me. And it was a bigger high school with more opportunities for all types of people, not just athletes. Right. And so,
Right.
'cause I wanted to be an athlete. I love athletes, but I'm not that athletic. So, um, I'm more musical. So it was really fun to be in the Midwest where there's fewer members, and I loved meeting people of different faiths and asking them what they believed, because it was so different for me, from the Mormon town, and being like, what do you believe? I did find though that the Christians at my school were pretty much like, I will tell you what I think, but I'm not going to listen to you, you crazy Mormon. And that was really
Yeah.
sad for me. I thought, can't we just relate and like talk about what we believe and agree to disagree? I remember even as a teen not understanding that mindset, but
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. It's funny because the Mormons and the Christians have the same behavioral problems if we
Yes.
really look at it.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. Really
All
close.
right. So, yeah. Okay. So tell us a little more about your childhood, and let's really talk about your childhood and the part the church played, and what it was like growing up for you. You were homeschooled, and what were your parents like? Things like that.
My dad was the seminary teacher, so there was a stigma. I had to be the seminary teacher's daughter. I remember one time I said crap at school. Sorry if that's a bad word on here, and everybody came down on me so hard, like, oh my
What?
gosh, seminary teacher's daughter. So that was always a weird thing. But the church was, it was the only life I had, really. It was everything. So going to mutual and Wednesday night activities, and I was like, I considered my dad my best friend, but I was always trying to live to please him, and I was trying to gain his approval and affection. So I am the sixth great-granddaughter of Brigham Young on my dad's side. So my dad is a descendant of Brigham Young, and I would just say that if anyone listening has studied Brigham and his personality, and the way that he viewed women and himself and men versus women, I would say that attitude has gone down the line, and it's much softer in my relatives. It's not so extreme, thank goodness. But my uncles and dad are. It's clear that they're descendants of Brigham. I'll just say that. So. And it's made a lot of sense to find out the truth about Brigham Young. It's made a lot of my life make a lot more sense. So anyway, so a lot of my life was seeing my mom not always be very respected. So seeing women be treated as less than, and also being taught that as a female, I'm less competent and less important. And that my worth is tied up in how much I please and pleasure a man, by how I look and how well he considers me to be a wife, Anyway, so that was kind of, my education wasn't important. There was no emphasis on that. So pretty much right out of high school, I did enroll myself into college because my friends were doing it. and I did a year in school as an opera major at Wichita State University. But as soon as a return missionary came along and said, "Will you marry me?" I was like, "Yes, this is what I was made for, and nothing else." So I didn't finish my um, music major, and because I thought I was supposed to stay home and procreate and nothing else. So, and please my husband. So that's how I was raised in that regard. As far as the church goes, yeah. So I experienced release time seminary in Arizona with my dad as the teacher. And then I experienced early morning seminary in Kansas, which I did actually like better, even though it was hard to get up at, 5 a.m. every day. And with my dad, not as the teacher, but as the area coordinator over like a huge geographical area of institute and seminary teachers. So then he became my institute teacher before I got married. So that's kind of my little upbringing.
Okay. All right. I want to dive a little bit into this topic because this is a really important topic that I think a lot of women in the church are facing and we don't even know how to recognize it. And when we do recognize it, what on earth do we do with it? So
Mm-hmm.
there is this problem, the over sexualization of women within the LDS church, a church that teaches the law of chastity and virtue and all these things. So tell me a little bit about what that did to you as a teenager, because you have this time in a girl's life when you're trying to figure out who you are and what you're about, and you're being taught
Mm-hmm.
that it's all about your body. And so tell me a little bit about what that did to you as a teenager and kind of what was going on in your heart and your mind and how that affected you later.
I'll tell you, Claire, it set the trajectory for my whole life to this point. I'm 36 years old. Sorry, I forgot to say that. Just turned 36 a couple weeks ago. But basically what it did is it especially in my family, and again I would like to give grace to the men in my family. They are living as they've been taught, and they are not evil people or seeking to do and be evil. So I just want to make that clear and give them that grace. But um that's why it's, I think, so important to understand our roots. When we understand how and who Brigham Young was, and Heber C. Kimball, and the men that they surrounded themselves with, and their attitude towards women, it's spread throughout our entire church. So it affects every one of us in one way or another. So basically, what it did is it made me feel like if I had to be sexy or attractive, um, or else I had no worth. So if someone, as a teenager, if a boy was attracted to me, found me attractive, that is how I felt that I had worth and value as a human being. Um, so what, that can really mess a person up. Then I'm wired now, instead of seeking a healthy relationship, um, by finding someone with similar morals. I mean, I still thought I was doing that. I still was trying to do that. But ultimately, my inner wiring and beliefs was, please love me. Uh, First of all, because I was always trying to seek my dad's love and acceptance and approval. And also, um, like, hopefully I'm hot enough. Hopefully I look good enough so that I can be loved and accepted. Otherwise, I have no worth. I'm not smart. I'm just a woman. Meaning, I think I'm smart, but I mean, I was told my brains weren't a priority, right? Because I was just a woman. I was just a girl. So I don't know. That's such a loaded question. I remember a specific thing I'll share as a young woman. My bishop in my ward in Kansas was standing at the front and at the doors, the double doors entering, the chapel, shaking everybody's hands as they're coming in and greeting them one by one. And I remember loving my bishop, and his daughter was my friend. And I walked up to him to shake his hand, and I said, "Hi, Bishop," smiled. And he looked at me and looked down at my, like give me a once over. And then he looked away with his eyes really big. And he said, "Oh, good morning." And I just stood there in absolute shock. And I looked down at what I was wearing, and I was about to cry, and I was holding back the tears. Like, what? And I couldn't figure out what was wrong, because I always tried to dress modest. So my shirt was high enough, my skirt was long enough, but I was racking my brain, like, what have I done to disprove my priesthood leader what's wrong with me, and by the way, his daughter and I, we got asked if we were sisters all the time. We looked a lot alike. We could share clothes, but he would beam and gleam if she got up and bore her testimony in a lower cut shirt or shorter skirt than I would, So the messages I got were so tough. I had another bad experience with a bishop's wife, telling me that I was basically like a temptress because I commented once on her son, who was my friend. He was a grade younger than me, and said, "Hey, I heard you've been working out. Your sister tells me you've been working out." And I like went over. It was at a youth fireside. We're all in church clothes, and I said, "She tells me you've been working out." And I think I touched his arm, and it wasn't sexual. It wasn't like devious. It was with all of us friends and kids around, where we all knew each other. My other friend Bethany was there, and she later, during a combined young women activity with all, beehives, mimes, laurels, which they don't say anymore, but all of us there together with a member of the stake in the room, stake leadership in the room. She said, "President, I just have to raise my hand and say something. There is a young woman here who went up to my son and lifted up his shirt, and she said she walked over to him, proceeded to lift up his shirt and touched his arm. And she said, and my son told me, Mom, it was like fire. And so these girls have to be so careful with what they do and who they are. And I remember I'm a child, okay? I am a child. I I mean, I was a pure girl. I wasn't out doing things with boys that I wasn't supposed to be doing. And so this was a shock and a humiliation. I just anyway, so I feel like so much of my life I've been told I'm bad because I'm female or
Right.
I don't know. And so that definitely sunk in. And so then I married an abuser, and then like another one. And it just I even was engaged to like someone that wasn't fully respectful of me before I even married. And I just kept attracting men that treated me the way I was raised to believe in my ward, in my family.
So there are two sides of this coin that you are describing here. And the one side, and I relate to this because when I was in high school, I was a bishop's daughter, and then I went to an LDS private school, and I was always told, Claire, it's a good thing you're pretty. It's a good thing you're pretty. And what is everyone saying there? Well, they're saying, well, Claire, you're too stupid to do anything with your life. So it's a good thing you've got looks, right? Okay. But then there's the other side of the coin where I've had LDS men who are grown married men telling me that I walk suggestively, or that I do this wrong, or that I do that wrong. And I
Mhm.
went on a date once with a guy that nothing happened on that date, literally nothing. And he later told me that he knew that I was trying to get him to kiss me or something, and that I was trying to seduce him, and how inappropriate it was that I was trying to seduce him. And nothing happened on that date. We didn't even
Mhm.
like hug on the doorstep at the end of the date.
Mhm.
And so these are the kind of things that are happening to young women in the church. And that's why
Yeah.
it's so important that we talk about it, because I will tell you, we are when you start to feel like you're a walking sin because we're tempting the men. And I was the same as you. I dressed modestly.
Yeah.
I didn't do anything to suggest anything, but I was always being accused of, oh, well, you look this way and you look that way. So, the body shaming that happens to women because we look like women is
Yes.
creating us women that feel like we're a sin, but our purpose is just sex.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's disturbing, and it's disgusting, and it's ruining what our role as women truly is. And
Yes.
so maybe tell me a little bit about your thoughts about body shaming and what you learned later about what your role as a woman is, in contrast to the body shaming that you were experiencing as a teenager.
Yeah. So this is something that I didn't ask for, but when I was like 12 or 13, I started developing, well, about 10 or 11, I started developing. By the time I was 13, I was larger in my chest size for a very, very small, very skinny little girl. I was pretty tall, but I didn't have curves like in my hip area. No, I was very skinny, but I felt often that I was extra shamed because of this. And I remember hating it. I joined sports in my middle school years, and I would wear 4 sports bras to try to flatten them down so that, because I was so ashamed. I was ashamed. I had been told things by my dad, and the girls in middle school accused me of stuffing, and I was homeschooled. I only played sports with the school, so I didn't realize why these girls, since I was so sheltered, I didn't know that girls wanted to grow a chest, and so they would accuse me of stuffing. So I was always trying to flatten them, hide them, disguise them. I was scared of, you know, like nipping through or anything. I mean, I was so ashamed. I was so ashamed, and I was so embarrassed, and I hated them. I hated them for years. Anyway, so that's actually, I still sometimes struggle with that, because after I had my 2 babies, I got much smaller, and I was so happy, and then now not so much as small, and I still struggle with fighting, like, I am okay the way I am. This is how God made me, and I am a woman that has had 3 children now, and so my body changes, and that's okay, and I still have worth regardless of how my body looks, or if men shame me or lust after me. Another thing I want to point out, as an adult, this is a part of my story I'll share later on, but I shaved my head. I was made to shave my head in an abusive situation, and the amount of LDS men, my father included, that would comment to me directly about my hair and my looks. So, for example, one day I walk into sacrament meeting, and a man from my ward says to me, I'm currently in Idaho, by the way. A man from my ward says to me, I said, good morning, brother so and so, and shook his hand, and he looked at me and he said, when are you ever going to grow out your hair? And and he's a little bit older, so I have some compassion, but this is just one example of how many LDS men felt that they could walk up to me and make a comment to me about my body and my looks. It blew my mind, and they would say things like, I liked you better when my hair was really long and blonde, and I would get told, oh, I miss your long blonde hair, and like things like that. They didn't like how I looked, and they felt fine letting me know that they didn't like how I looked. And I think this is such, like, would we as women, would I ever walk up to a man in my ward and say, when are you ever going to get rid of that dandruff? Or when are you ever going to lose that pot belly? Like, we wouldn't do that to them. Why do they think, some of them, not all of them, of course, why do they think they can have an opinion about our bodies and how we look? But they do. This is just part of the church culture. So yes, I come against it strongly. I am a big advocate for equality in every way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and that's the thing is we have these problems. When I was engaged, I had a lady walk up to me in my ward, and I have chronic illness, and everybody in the ward knows I have a chronic illness. And she comes up to me and she goes, well, you're really lucky that he would have somebody like you. And I was like, thanks. Like, I had no idea what to say. I didn't even really realize what she was saying until later when I thought about it.
Yeah.
And I never even ended up marrying that guy for the exact same reasons that you're talking about, because these men are very lustful.
Yeah.
And one side, we're saying that they need to not be lustful, but then we're training them to look at women as if they are just an object.
Yeah.
And it is
Yeah.
so messed up. And none of this stuff, I'm so glad we're talking about this, because none of this stuff is ever said out loud. So, I believe there are some pure guys in the LDS church, but you tell them about this stuff and they're like, whatever, Claire, it's not really like that. And I'm like, because you don't see it, because you actually are pure, and it's
Mhm.
rare, but like, that's why you don't see it.
Yeah.
And so
You're,
women should not be looked at this way. Women have great power from God to do great things. And when we understand our role as women, then we have the ability to go forward and build the kingdom, which is what we should be doing as women. We're not just meant to be there for our husbands, to pleasure them and to whatever. That's not what it's about.
no.
But we have all this healing we have to do coming out of the church because we're so used to men treating us this way. And I
Mhm.
was raised, I had a fantastic father. My dad never treated me that way. He never did that. And yet I had all these problems with how I was viewing myself. I was like, where is this coming from? Well,
Yes.
the leadership, the men that I'm dating, and it's all LDS. That's all I interacted with. So, this is a really important conversation.
I think that's really interesting that even though you come from these parents that did not sexualize you and treat you like you're an object for men, you were still having the same problems because ultimately, if your home life was fairly healthy,
Mhm.
you shouldn't be struggling with those things. That had
Mhm.
to come from somewhere. Like you said, that's crazy.
Yeah. Okay. So if somebody was to ask you, so why do you think these things are passed down from Brigham Young? What would you say?
Why do I think they're passed down from Brigham Young?
Yes.
Well, Brigham Young was a part of what I think is a very evil secret society that engages in extremely bizarre, weird, dark, secret works involving nudity a lot of times and involving death type things, blood, and secrets. And I was very opening when I read the exoneration of Emma, Joseph, and Hiram to find out from a church friendly source because I did not resonate with the anti Mormon sources. They were really biased. But to find out from our own church records that Brigham had visited Maine and had met with the Cochranites who kind of engaged in like this free love sort of wife swapping sexual thing. They would do rituals and inappropriate activity together with people that they weren't married to. And then he also, and we have this on record, that he went there by himself. They were supposed to travel by at least two at a time. But he went by himself, supposedly, according to the sources shared in this book. And then he also, these are also on church records, he also had all of the 12 go to Maine, meet him there. And then you find out that suddenly Heber and Brigham have mistresses. They're bringing home women. And then rumors start circling in Nauvoo that Joseph is preaching spiritual wifery and he's like, not sure what's happening. And, but the real crux of it is when you read about the women's lives once he hauled anyone who would follow him to the middle of nowhere, which eventually became Utah. That is where it's really sad. Michelle Stone has an incredible episode where she talks about some of the first words that Brigham spoke to the members when they arrived. And it's truly heartbreaking, telling the women, and Heber C. Kimball telling the women they come after and second um, to men, and that they are basically doomed and damned unless they shut up and do as they're told by these men. And it's just heartbreaking to find out what happened to so many of these women. So I think this is our legacy. And I think a way to maybe hide the terrors that happened during that time, we have as a church glorified pioneers instead of seeing the truth of what happened to these immigrants and these people coming, how many of them were lied to, many of them were left on purpose by the leaders, to suffer and struggle along the way and starve to death because there were other more important pressing things like Brigham sending someone to get, some new big thing he bought for one of his many mansions. Anyway, I digress. Finding that out made all the sense in the world to me. I just want to share this one thing, Claire.
Hmm.
My life has been really crazy, and I followed all the steps of what I was supposed to do as a righteous, um, you know, uh, member of the church in every way I knew how. Anyway, we have glorified the pioneers, which of course we want to be thankful for all the good that any of them did. But we have made a holiday into it and a big, yearly thing with the youth to go on a trek and reenact these things. And we're trying to make them these spiritual experiences, these really good things. But when you look back and find out, oh, many of them were they were treated horribly, not only as they traveled, but once they arrived. And I think that's a real travesty. So to know that that's our real legacy, not just the legacy movie that's really faith inspiring that I grew up watching. But did you see that Legacy Pioneer movie, Claire?
Yes.
Growing up,
Hmm.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, who hasn't, right?
Right.
But that our real legacy is a much more tragic and dark story. And that helps make sense. Oh, so what I was saying is I've always been the type of person that asks why, but there are talks, and my dad taught me even, we're not supposed to ask why. Never ask why, just ask what. I don't remember who gave this talk, but it has never left me. Because when I was going through my hard things in my life, I would just pour myself into conference talks, the church website, anything I could. I would listen nonstop and re-listen and trying so hard to have my life not be so awful, because they told me this is the formula. So there are talks that say, don't ask why, ask what. What can you do or what can you learn? But don't ask why. And so that was always something I struggled with because my biggest burning question was why? Why am I doing everything right and marrying a returned missionary? And why does he treat me this way? Why don't I have the marriage I was promised? And why does this keep happening to me? And why? But I wasn't allowed to ask why. So finally I've been able to ask why. And the truth really does set you free, right? To find out our real history, not our sugar-coated history. You go,
Mhm.
oh, that's the why. That's why I've been ashamed for being a female. That's why I've been blamed for boys looking at porn and having bad thoughts, or like you,
Mhm.
walking seductively. I mean, absolutely ridiculous. But when you know
Mhm.
the why and the history, it all makes sense. My life
It
makes
all makes sense.
yes.
Yep, and the women are suffering because of it now. I had a friend after high school, he was one of my closest friends in high school. He sent me like a 4-page long email about how he was addicted to porn for all of our high school years and how it was my fault. And it was all my fault in his mind. And he gave me like this long speech of how it was all my fault. And I'm thinking, what did I do?
Nothing.
How is that my fault?
Yeah.
But it wrecked me later on. So these are the things that are happening to these young girls.
Yeah.
And I don't think that the girls know what to do about it. I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't know where it was coming from. I just thought I was a walking sin. And it
Yep.
made it so I was tugging at my clothes constantly. I was an
Yeah.
anxious wreck. I wanted to make sure like every inch of me is covered.
Yep.
I've always dressed modestly. That's never been an issue for me.
Yep.
But it's an issue when the men are looking at you in that way. And you know what? That's their choice. They're choosing to lust. It's not our fault.
Right.
And somebody needs to
You're right.
tell these young girls that it is not your fault
Nope.
because I wish like my parents were telling me that, but then I was hearing something totally different from people in
Mhm.
the church. And it I had a lot of healing to do.
Yeah. Well, and Claire,
Mhm.
even modesty, I believe in modesty and dignity, and purity.
Mhm.
However, what about like I even think that to blame someone for dressing immodestly is wrong because think about it, let's create a more extreme scenario. Let's take someone that's attracted to children. Okay? So a pedophile, um,
Mhm.
a child can be fully clothed or not fully clothed, but a child is an innocent child. And if someone is choosing to allow perverted thoughts and behaviors towards children, it doesn't matter what the child wears or doesn't wear. The child is innocent. So I propose that modesty, however everyone personally feels is modest for them, meaning taking pride in these temples that we're given. I think that's important. But I even come against the whole shaming and blaming women who are dressed immodestly and seductively because men still have a choice. They still have a responsibility and a calling from God to be pure. And so it is nobody's fault. There could be tons of naked women in front of them and they still have a choice, right?
It's
Anyway, I
true.
think of Joseph of Egypt. He ran. He
Right.
said, no, thanks.
Exactly.
No, thanks. And I love the pictures in
Mhm.
the church that are painted of her, sleeveless, like, I mean,
Mhm.
she's very attractive looking and showing some more skin than we would in the church. And he runs, right? So I'm so
Mhm.
glad we have that story in scripture to show and
Yep.
prove that it's not about how the woman dresses or behaves. Okay, sorry. It's about
Yeah,
men taking hold of their own thoughts and accountability.
and I totally agree with that. And you know what? It's the same. Women have to do the same thing. It's no
Yep.
different. We all have to bridle our passions. We all
Mhm.
have to choose to follow God. We all have to choose to follow good thoughts. We all have intrusive thoughts that the devil puts in our head.
Mhm.
Kick it out. We
Mhm.
choose what we do with it.
Mhm.
And when we can choose to harness the power of God to overcome the things of the flesh, that's when we are truly on the path that God wants us to be on. And we're not doing it by ourselves. God is empowering us to be able to overcome these things in the flesh. All of us go through teenage phases. All of us do stupid things. But the point is that we have repentance. And when we repent, we have the atonement that gives us power to overcome these things. And if we teach it that way, we're not afraid to touch somebody on the shoulder of the opposite sex, which why on earth are we sexualizing things that are not sexual? That's
Exactly.
bizarre.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And shaming
Mhm.
children who don't need to be shamed. And then we're
Absolutely.
told, go get married and explore your bodies. And it's like, this evil body, what? That,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not the only Mormon girl that's had a wedding night that's like, this is so uncomfortable, and I just think the shame could be done away with. So it would be better for men, women, boys, girls, all around. No shame.
Yeah, absolutely. We should not be ashamed. Our body, when I was able to overcome the shame I felt about my own body because I was a woman and I was a walking sin, I was able to understand that my body was created to build the kingdom. And when I understand that, number one, I'm making choices that are good choices with my body to do the things that God needs me to do. And
Yeah.
number two, I'm not seeing myself as a walking sin anymore. And it all melted away. And
Mm.
all of the pain from all these people melted away when I learned that. And that's what these young girls need to be learning because it's
Yeah.
not your fault. You're not a walking sin. Like we are women and we're shaped like women.
Mhm.
That's real life. Like
And
we
control
can't
yourself.
change.
We do too. We control ourselves too. So,
Exactly. We all
oh,
do. We all have to bridle our passions.
yeah,
So absolutely. All right. Okay. So let's dive a little bit more into your story. Now that we've had, we'll get down off our soapboxes for a minute.
yeah.
We'll probably get on another one. Okay. So now you've reached the point where you've had this experience and felt sexualized by men, and then you got married to your first husband. Okay, what happened next? Let's kind of go into your young adult years and what happened next.
Okay, so I got married in the temple to a return missionary, just like I was supposed to. And immediately within the first week, he started treating me differently. He started ignoring me and pretending like I didn't exist, even if I would try to address him, follow him around, beg and plead to know what I had done wrong. He would just pretend I didn't exist. And then after I would break per se, then he would surprise me, like maybe come up behind me the next day after I'd cried myself to sleep, and he would be like, "Sorry," and put his arms around me, and I'd be like, "Oh, I forgive you. Oh, we just had a misunderstanding. It's okay. It's totally okay." And I was just so pure and innocent and unassuming and eager to be happy and forgive and love, and then it would happen again, and then again and again, and that became the norm. He would get angrier and angrier. He really struggled with pornography and anyway, and honesty and anger outbursts, and so that was, we had two kids together, two beautiful beautiful children, and but I tried all the things. I tried to, again, live the gospel harder. I tried to get, I tried to get him to want a good marriage too, and to want to heal too. And I finally realized that I was trying to make him be something he wasn't. I was trying to make him want to be in a happy marriage with me, and he didn't want that. And he was showing me with his actions that that's not what he wanted. And anyway, life got harder and harder and harder. I was pretty much alone, and I just had to rely entirely on the Lord. I had my wonderful family, but who do love me. My parents love me, but my dad was my bishop, and he was so afraid as bishop of like siding with his daughter and that looking bad or wrong. So he tried to always be like, well, let's look at what you did wrong. And so I did. I was just always in this mindset of, I got to fix myself, and then he won't behave this way. My husband, I got to fix myself, and then he'll be nice to me. And anyway, but eventually I relied on the Lord. I said, Lord, what do you want me to do? What do I do? And I would turn to scriptures, and he would answer me, and he would say, you need to part ways. And I was like, oh, I mean, hello, divorce in the church.
Right.
No, this was an eternal marriage. Like, this is forever. And he would tell me again, and I'd say, please don't be mad at me, Lord. Don't be angry, but like, I'm asking again, just to make sure I wasn't misled. What, like, please tell me what to do. And it would be, you need to separate. You need to go your separate ways. And I finally, in the end, decided to stay with him. But then the Lord told me, if you stay with him, your son will grow up and treat a woman how he treats you. And your daughter will grow up and marry someone just like her dad. And that's what did it for me. I wasn't worth enough. I was willing to stay in the abuse forever to try to help my children. But when the Lord said it's also hurting your children, that's what helped me. So I my story is crazy. Okay. But that was very hard. You have no idea. Even just driving to like the attorney's office for the first time was one of the scariest things of my life up to that point, praying and praying and praying. Like, am I a horrible sinner? Am I of Satan? Like, we were married in the temple. And so that was scary, but the Lord just helped me all the way through it. It was really tough. It wasn't easy, but it came, finally, it was done. And then I immediately rebound married. Why, Claire? Because number one, I've been raised to believe that my only worth is how I please a man. Okay, so I don't even know how to exist to this point, right? In my early 20s, I didn't even know how to exist independently, autonomously as a human being, a child of God, knowing who I am and being okay with that. I thought that I had to be with someone, and I'm supposed to be with someone. Not only that, I felt worthless if someone wasn't loving me because I didn't come from a really emotionally stable upbringing. So I rebound married someone that I met at these like business seminar things. And just because he showed me attention and he looked like he was the exact opposite in every way of this Mormon boy I married, he was formerly Amish. He is, yes. So I thought, no, I don't even care if they're a member or not. I just want them to be nice to me. The way I describe it, Claire, is like, let's say you've been tied up in the desert and you haven't been allowed to eat or drink for, a week or however long you could go without food and water. And when you're finally untied, there's like a table, a feast of food and water before you, and you like eat as much as you can because you're starving, and then you get sick because your body hasn't been digesting food or anything. So it's irrational, but it's because of the state you're in. You're in a state of trauma. So I rebound married someone who was, like I said, old order Amish. We eloped. My parents knew about it. They supported it. I moved to Tennessee with him and with my two little babies. And by the way, the reason I was able to do this is because right after the divorce, my children's dad moved out of state right after. So he kind of like gave up his time with the kids as long as he felt like it and just doing his own thing. So I moved. That enabled me to go because he wasn't there anyway. So I moved to Tennessee, and again, within the first week, I'm seeing the same exact things that I experienced in my first marriage, which of course threw me into a deep, deep, deep depression. Now I'm out in the middle of Tennessee, which is beautiful, by the way. I actually really miss it there. But I'm in Tennessee. I've got these two little babies, and he was also very abusive. He could talk for hours, and his talking would turn me into a mess of bones on the floor. Like I wouldn't know my up from my down, my right from my left. I would be in such confusion and feelings of worthlessness and like, man, I really am stupid. Man, I really don't know anything, man. And he would say things to me. It was just like demons all the time speaking through him. He'd say, you think you know who you are? You don't know who you are. And he would just say all these horrible things about me, and he could go for hours. And he was also really sexually abusive. Anyway, so finally though, this is a blessing. He actually said to me at one point, he hated that I was a member of the church. And so he said, that's it. One day, that's it. He didn't say it this bluntly because a lot of times narcissists will speak abusers, they'll speak in non-absolutes, so you can never pin them down to anything. So me being aware of this, I actually pinned him down. I got him to admit this essentially. And what he basically told me was, he kind of cornered me in the kitchen one day and said, "You drop this Mormon religion thing or get out." And I was like, oh my gosh, I have nothing, no money. The spirit had told me to start setting aside money, and I didn't listen because I thought, oh my gosh, that's just me being doubtful. And here I am in a second marriage, and that's already evil enough that I'm divorced, and I'm not going to put any doubt in my mind. So I didn't even say money. But anyway, the Lord helped me with that too. He helped me miraculously get an apartment that I didn't qualify for. I didn't have the funds for it. I didn't have proof of funds, but she was nice and let me in, which was a total miracle. Because all the other apartment places were not safe for my children. So I'm there, and then anyway, he would come over though, and punish me verbally and try to say I was being a bad wife. And anyway, that went on for a long time, but I was slowly getting stronger. And he did break me down quite a bit though. And I didn't want to move. I'd already moved so much. So I was like, Mom, Dad, I'm just going to stay here in Tennessee. It's beautiful here. I've moved so much. I don't want to move again. But he wore me down so thin that one day I called my parents and I said, Mom, Dad, if you showed up with a moving truck, I would just get in. And they did. So I got it. So see, just because we come from Brigham and have so many flaws doesn't mean we are without beautiful qualities.
Mhm.
So my wonderful dad showed up and helped me move. And we drove, all the way back to Idaho where they had moved. And I'd never really been to Idaho before, so I moved to Idaho with them, and then I met my husband now, which is a whole other separate story. But anyway, do you want me to stop?
Okay. All right. So we're going to stop there. And I want to ask a little bit, some back questions. Okay. So with your first husband, how long did you date him for?
Not long. We probably knew each other, I don't remember, 8 months before we got married.
Okay. Okay. So 8 months. Did he show any signs at all that you could tell that he was going to do this?
No, well, there is one thing, but I just assumed it was a normal human thing. It was a fight. It was his mom and I disagreed. She wanted the wedding one place, and I said it's my wedding, and I want it here. So um, he was torn because he's a little mama's boy. So he was torn between. He wanted me to just like do what his mom wanted, but I put my foot down and I said, I'm, I mean, I love your mom, and no offense to her, but this isn't her wedding. So this is my wedding. Um, so he really struggled with that, but he was still in the love bombing phase. So even though it was hard for him, he ultimately sided with me, but not without lots of kind of like that should have been a red flag to me. But other than that, no, he completely love bombed me. So, um, I mostly saw like he seemed like the perfect guy. He was calm. He was so chill. He was nothing like what he turned out to be, which was explosive and angry. He would get very angry and his eyes would get huge, with like anger huge. I mean, and so I didn't see any of that before. Zero, zilch, nada.
Okay. Yeah. So the reason why I asked this question is because I really think it will help some young girls navigating some of these things because you're not an isolated story. Like it is so common that we date even 8 months. I mean, that's pretty long. Like I feel like you should tend to see like something, but these guys are so good. They're so good at lying. Okay. But the one thing you brought up that I love is the love bombing. That is such a red flag. Girls, if you meet a guy and he love bombs you from the very beginning, run for your life, okay? Because you got to build a friendship first, and that's normal. It's normal to build a friendship first, okay? It's not the love bombing isn't normal, okay? And there's probably something that's going to come out way later. So this is why I ask you these questions is because these points can really help people and really help some of these young single girls that are trying to navigate these some things. Your story is not isolated. I think many women experience these. And for me, I was like, if I marry or turn missionary in the temple, I've got it figured out. And I was so wrong. I was so wrong. I almost did. I almost married a return missionary in the temple. God showed me he was super into porn and it was off. And that's not an isolated story either. And then us women get trashed for making choices that we don't want a man that treats us like that. We want a man who only has eyes for us. But that's like a horrible thing now in the church because, well, men are just like this. No, they're not.
Yeah.
People, so one of the criticisms I get on this podcast a lot is that we have women activism on this podcast or that I'm a man basher. My response to that is that I am not against men. I am against men
No,
behaving like animals. That's what I'm against.
men behaving
And
like males, exactly. Or men
that's why
blaming
this
anything
episode.
on women, and they might say, "Well, you women are blaming things on men." No, 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 no. It's all about accountability. I am where I am today
Yes.
because I have looked in the mirror and been like, "What is wrong with me?" Guess what? I did have a lot wrong with me. It took that second marriage for me to go, oh, here is this totally different guy. He was raised Amish, for crying out loud. We're talking old order Amish, no electricity. Okay. Like, I went to his family farm. We picked up eggs. His mom is still Amish. Like, it was crazy. It was intense. They hated me. They called me Jezebel because they thought I was a harlot because I'd already been divorced. So
Oh my goodness.
anyway, by this second marriage, um, it was the one blessing that came from it was that I realized here I married this completely different guy, old order Amish, right? And totally different from my born and raised LDS man over here. And they're both treating me almost identically. And they both have the same issues. And that taught me, oh, I didn't know. I was in my early 20s. I'm like, oh, there must be something going on with something inside of me that is attracting these men. So I've done a lot of looking in the mirror. Like, how am I attracting these types of men and these types of behaviors? How am I inviting this? Why do I keep getting treated this way? Well, it was something in me. I was doing everything perfect on the outside, everything that any marriage book, any marriage talk, any conference talk, any bishop, anything that I was told to do, I was doing it. I was doing it. I was like therapy. I was into anything and everything to try to help these marriage situations. And yet I'm being treated this way by men that didn't want to work on anything or look in the mirror. And so anyway, that second marriage did help me. It helped me look in the mirror and go, I was raised to believe I'm a victim. I have a victim mentality. Guess what? If you have a victim mentality, you're going to attract abusers. So that was something I started working on. Like, okay, whoa, how do I reverse this in myself? Oh, you were raised to take offense a lot. Whoa, okay. Oh my gosh, yeah, that came from my family. How do I stop being so sensitive and not taking offense? How do I like be um, more self-aware and more respectful of others and not triggered by everybody, you know? And so, yes, we are saying to men, we are doing what we're asking you to do, and that is look in the mirror and look at your flaws and own up to where you were wrong. And I actually did this. I actually apologized to my two husbands and I said, I'm sorry for my part, my role. And my role was that I believed that I wasn't worthy of respect, and therefore you treated me according to my belief that I wasn't worth your respect. And I am sorry for the role that I played, my imperfect and flawed self played. I'm genuinely sorry because for all of us, you know, and so I believe that men can take accountability just like I have tried to do throughout my life and still do every day because I'm not perfect. So,
Absolutely. Well, and when a woman believes that she is worthy of respect, that gets them a little bit in trouble sometimes. I'm still in the dating phase, so I've learned that I know that I'm worthy of respect, and sometimes that means that I challenge these men. Sometimes it means I step on their toes. Sometimes it means I sass the living daylights out of them because you know what? When it comes to dating, these men need to be tested or we will be deceived. And I'm sure that seems intense to a lot of young men. But you know what? The right men, the boys will run, but the men, they will stay. They will stay and they will be patient with you and they will love you and they will walk this road with you because that's the whole point of a relationship and marriage is we're walking these roads together anyway. So girls, put on your game face and challenge the guys you're dating because it's important. You'll see how they behave. You'll see how they behave and you'll see all their true colors. It's kind of hard when you're dating. Us women naturally want to give all of our love right up front. But that doesn't help you to see the true colors in the guy that you're dating. This is a crappy world that we live in, but
it's not safe.
it is what
Give all
it
your love.
is.
No.
Yeah.
Got to make
Yep.
sure that it's safe. And usually we don't know, because often us young girls in the church, we don't go to young women's and think, okay, we're going to study what a sociopath is. We're going to study what a narcissist is. We're going to study the red flags of all these things. We're going to study addiction and how to spot the signs of addiction and the true core, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and cause of addiction, and looking and getting to the core and root of things. Like, we're not taught any of that in young women's. We're just told marry in the temple
And a return missionary, and it'll be perfect. And that is a joke.
Mhm.
So we're getting pretty bold on this episode.
I love
All
it.
right. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and continue your story. All right. So you had 1 divorce, 2 divorce. What happened next?
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about how that affected me in the church. People don't know what to do with someone that, well, even like what you said, someone that has chronic illness. You said people don't know what to do with you, and it's the
Mhm.
same for being divorced. Divorce is bad, right? Because we focus so much on the temple and eternal marriage forever. It's forever. In fact, one of the very last young women's lessons that my daughter had this last year, she came home and told me, was all about temple marriage, and you do not divorce, that divorce is bad. Claire, I am here to tell you, the scriptures when Christ says that it's only because people are evil that divorce is allowed. People think, oh my gosh, divorce equals evil. No, 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 no. Divorce is a gift from God to the people to the people that would otherwise be stuck with abusers. So divorce has been hard, but if it wasn't allowed, I would still be with a man who was not kind to me or safe in any way, shape, or form. So, like, divorce is a gift, and so I hate that we're still teaching. We're still teaching kids that divorce is the worst thing. We're not teaching them that abuse is bad, or
Right.
dishonesty or dysfunction or lies. We're not telling them,
Mhm.
or addiction or porn. We're just saying, just don't divorce. Whatever you do, just get married in the temple and just stay married. That's it. I can't believe we're still teaching that. I can't believe it. Even my daughter was like, "Yeah, mom, they said this," and I'm like, yeah, yeah, girls. If he and by the way, that's why I stayed for 4 years with my first abuser, is because I thought, I was told in Young Women's that marriage sucks and is hard. I remember the young women leader that said that to me, and so I just, when it was hard, I was like, well, and I'd think back on that Young Women's lesson. They did say marriage is hard, and so I was just falling into deeper, deeper darkness and depression and loneliness, and it doesn't have to be that way, girls. So anyway, I if I knew what I knew now, the first time he pulled that behavior, of ignoring my existence, I'd have said, "Excuse you, I am a daughter of God, and I won't be treated that way." So I maybe would have given one chance, like, don't ever treat me like this again. I'm not going to stand for it, because we are equals, and I wouldn't do that to you. That's cruel. And I'd never have done that, by the way, like, just to punish and torture someone and get them to break, and then anyway, scoop them up after they've been broken into nothing. Um, I wish I would have gone back and if I could go back, that's what I would have done. So I just want to tell girls that, and I do tell my own 2 daughters that. I say, then the nanosecond that they treat you less than you are, and that's a big deal. That needs to be paid attention to, and maybe, like, give them one more chance. And if they do that crap again, I'm not saying you have
Mhm.
to be perfect. I'm talking about cruel, extremely blatant, unhealthy, pointed behavior at you. That is not okay. And I wish I'd have left right away. And I tell my girls, it doesn't matter if we just spent tons of money on a wedding. I don't care. You walk away. That's not right. And I wish we're teaching girls that in the church
Yes.
and young men,
Mhm.
because sadly, there are some abusive women out there. Sadly, there are more men,
Oh,
but anyway.
yeah, no, there are, and that's the problem is that if we know how to face abuse, and the other problem is that those of us who decide to stand up against it, we often get shamed by other people. I know when I called my wedding off, the answer I got from most people was that, well, he's the one that dodged the bullet. I wasn't the one that was addicted to something and living it and lying to the person that I was claiming to love. That's not what I was doing.
That will
And
always
so,
happen. People will pick a side. They want to make sense of it, and so they'll pick a side and be like, "Oh yeah, I saw him do this once, so he's to blame. Oh, I heard her yell once,
yeah,
so she's to blame." Like, Yeah, I actually said I'm the one that said that once before I was ever divorced. I remember a couple in my ward got divorced, and I said that. I said, "Ooh, I heard her yell once at her kids, so she's probably the reason why their marriage failed," you know? And of course, the Lord humbled me, and I ate my
We were
words.
all Pharisees
And
once.
so, but people in the church don't know what to do with divorced people. It was a blessing because after my first divorce, I was the primary chorister, primary pianist, and the ward organist. So for 3 hours, I was behind a piano or organ. And that actually was a blessing for me at the time because people were so awkward with me and I was struggling so bad that I just needed that time of the beautiful music and my connection with the Lord. And it actually was a blessing because people don't realize, but the organists and pianists are often invisible. So people kind of don't pay attention to them. And that was actually a tender mercy at the time. So
Yeah, definitely. Okay. All right. Continue your story. What happened next?
So I end up in Idaho, and then not long after I meet my husband now, and we have quite a story too. I don't even know if I should bring it up, but my story with him is that he was not a member, and but the Spirit was like, move forward, move forward, move forward. And I'm like, hey, Lord, I really need lots and lots of confirmations because clearly I don't know how to pick them. So I felt like the Lord was like, move forward. And so I said, okay. And I said, he's not getting baptized. He was taking the missionary lessons, but he wasn't getting baptized. And I'm like, okay, Lord, he's not getting baptized. Do you still want me to marry him? And the Lord said yes. And so I'm like, okay. So I did. And so that was after 1 year. And we got married right after a year, and we got pregnant right away. And but that first year, while I was pregnant, he changed. He went into, but it wasn't like before where the others changed. It was different. It was more like he went into his trauma state, like his fight or flight was flipped on, and he couldn't see me anymore for me. He was viewing me as like his past, his ex-wife, afraid that I was going to cheat on him like his ex-wife did, afraid that I was going to um, run off with all his money. Like he started seeing me as not me, and we were like, he wouldn't connect with me, and it was really tough. I was really confused. It was a really tough year. But then, and then 2 weeks after our daughter was born, he was holding our new baby, and I was cooking some hamburger on the stove, and the doorbell rang. And the kids are like, Mom, door. And I go and get it, and it's somebody serving me papers, divorce papers from him. So he served me divorce papers, and I was in shock. As you can imagine, this is all pertinent to what happens next in my life story, which brings me to today. So that was a shock to say the least. I didn't think I could get any lower. I eventually moved out. That was in October, and then I eventually moved out in December into my own house, and I had wonderful people in my ward um, help me with that. My ward, 2 wards, and just absolute angels. There are just so many beautiful people in the church. I just love. I just want to say that, and that do kind things. I still consider them angels. And I moved out, and now I was in my 20s still. I wasn't 30 yet, with 3 kids from 2 different dads, married and divorced 3 times in my 20s, as the most active, true believing, temple attending member. And people always gossip every time there's a divorce. So my ward and people are kind of gossiping and asking my friends, oh my gosh, what happened? Oh my gosh, did you hear? And that's always hard. And I also had some really cruel, unkind, inconsiderate things said by my family, by my dad and his older brother. And they decided to get on my Facebook and scour my Facebook to figure out why I was where I was. And they were like, well, have you seen her pictures, Dion? Yeah, that's my dad's name. And so they went and looked at my pictures and decided that because of, I don't know, I honestly have no idea. I just remember bawling and sobbing that my family wasn't on my side. It didn't feel that way anyway. I'm sure they believed they were on my side, because my dad even told me this story about them looking through my Facebook, trying to help me. He told me this story trying to say, your pictures are bad. Maybe, I actually don't even know. To this day, I remember combing through my pictures with tears streaming down my face, going, "What is wrong with me? What are they seeing?" Because I was modest in every photo. I to this day, I have no idea what they were pointing out about my photos. There were pictures of my kids, so I don't even know. But I was sobbing. I just felt so alone. So here I am. I'm trying to give you the impact of, I've already been raised to believe I'm worthless, or my only worth is what a man thinks of me. And now 3 men, have treated me so poorly. And early 20s, I'm in the church. I'm just like so open, like, Lord, help, tell me what's wrong with me. What's wrong with me? So it's that time that a woman came into my life. My sister was visiting from Arizona, and she invited a friend over that she knew in Idaho. And I did not know this person. And I came home from getting my oil changed, and there's a woman sitting on my couch.